Hey, thanks for being in the REC experience. I'm your host, Takhar, and we got your co-host, Laura Stewart. How you doing, Laura Elto
Hey,
Stewart?
Jazzy, how's it going?
I'm
I'm
good,
getting
I'm
used
good.
to seeing you this way through video.
I know, I don't even remember now how you kind of look in the flesh, in the real. So thanks for joining me and getting this episode out. And we're obviously doing this virtually. We have a very, very special guest with us. As our viewers can see, we have Karen Dougherty joining us today. And Karen, you're coming in from Toronto, Karen?
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
Karen, both Laura and I saw your write-up with CBC, and we were like, we have to have Karen on because what you started is just amazing. I want you to talk about that more, but just before you get into that, tell us, if you don't mind, share kind of your background with our viewers and listeners.
Sure. I'm currently a registered psychotherapist in private practice in downtown Toronto, and I'm a psychoanalytic candidate. About to become a bona fide psychoanalyst in a few months, so that's exciting. That's been a long road. And my background is as a documentary filmmaker, journalist, social issue documentaries, history documentaries, and I still currently make films, but they're psychoanalytic films, educational films, and so on.
Psychoanalyst. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit? What does that mean? What do you do?
A psychoanalyst, it's sort of like long form therapy. And it's like, you know what slow cooking is. It's like slow, very long, deep, 4 times, 5 times a week on the couch, analysis that over time is meant to reduce suffering, increase insight, and produce sort of long-term, deep characterological change. So you've seen the New Yorker cartoons with the, guy on the couch and the therapist behind him, daydreaming or playing Candy Crush, or, that's the sort of like cliche. It sort of started with Freud, and we've moved a lot beyond Freud, but we still, think a lot about the way that Freud thought. Maybe not so much what he thought, because he wasn't always right, but sort of the way that he thought about the human mind, the psyche, and the unconscious.
Now,
certainly a lot more than what I learned in my first year intro to psych class.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
What made you give that up, Laura?
I think everyone had to take that class, and you just try and get through it the best you can for most of it.
And all we remember is how hard statistics was, Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really just want to, I want to dive in now, Karen, with what you, I guess I want to call it really like a movement that you were able to start, this gathering of therapists that are essentially giving services, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's free services for healthcare workers.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just make a little correction. I'll say that It's pro bono, not free.
Got it.
We're offering our expertise and our time as the mental sort of health community in Ontario without compensation, because we need to. There isn't adequate governmental support for mental health. In our province, in our country, in our world, really. And so we saw a crucial gap in public health that needed to be filled fast during a time of crisis.
Now,
yeah, so, it's interesting. I was sort of saying to Jasmine, our last day at the office, which I believe was the Monday, the 16th of March. And when we all kind of found out after Trudeau was said, go home, stay home. And, a lot of people originally we're just thinking about jobs and how am I going to pay the bills, and where's rent going to come from, and that sort of thing. But perhaps because of my background, I personally have had issues with a lot of anxiety and depression. And so my first thing was like, this is not going to be good for people such as myself. And obviously for many more, maybe who have never even experienced mental health problems in the past, but just to be forced sort of outside of your norm and into isolation, I said, this is going to be a problem for a lot of people. And so obviously we really appreciate you starting this movement. And then maybe you could touch on a little bit like why being isolated or feeling like isolated in these times, why is that impacting everybody so much?
So I want to first talk about the initiative, which is quite specifically geared. I saw something on social media where a similar initiative had been started in New York, right? So New York is a couple of weeks ahead of us in terms of this whole crisis. And what I saw was a sort of group of mental health workers and, you know, spiritual counselors and circle keepers and so on. It's a real New York thing, who were banding together to provide pro bono mental health support to frontline COVID healthcare workers. And I thought that is so necessary. We need to do that here. And within a couple of hours, we had up our website, and within 3-4 days, we had 450 licensed psychotherapists. We now have 800. This is 2 weeks later, we have 800 licensed.
Sorry, Karen, is that in the city of Toronto, the 800?
In Ontario.
Or is it in Ontario, I apologize. Okay, awesome, continue. 800
licensed and vetted, because we've had to vet them all, make sure people have the credentials they say they do, make sure they licensed mental health professionals. So that's psychotherapists, psychologists, social workers, RN therapists, occupational therapists who are licensed to perform the act of psychotherapy under the Psychotherapy Act in Ontario. That's what we're doing, because we knew, sort of looking at what was happening in Italy, what was happening in China, and even what was happening in New York, that we were going to have a mental health crisis, catastrophe among frontline workers before, during, and then after the pandemic. So we're offering pro bono teletherapy during the pandemic, but we're going to have to, as a society, figure out after how we're going to provide mental health support, not just for these folks who are going to have PTSD and depression. 50% of the doctors in Wuhan, after things started subsiding, are now clinically depressed. So we know we're going to have to support those folks, not pro bono. The government's going to have to step up and figure things out. But then there's also the mental health toll, as you point out, of, you know, isolation, enforced isolation. Wow. I mean, I've had to move my entire practice online, as all of my colleagues have. And just that change alone is huge. I mean, any change in the frame, as we say, in the time or the frequency or the how of delivering therapy is like really ricochets in the psyche of people. And now we have a whole society going through that, not just people who have pre-existing mental health struggles, but all of us. I do have to say that for some folks who already are kind of like hunkering down in their life, are a little bit relieved, oddly, because now everybody's doing it and they don't have to feel so guilty. So, I mean,
interesting.
You know, people are bringing their own current circumstances and their history to bear on this. So everybody's kind of experiencing it differently, and it has a different symbolic meaning in people's imagination. So that's been kind of fascinating. So of course, you know, you're on social media, you're surfing, and you find a million tips and tricks every minute for how to get through the pandemic. And we all know what the advice is now. We can rattle it off, make connections, do yoga, you know, like take up a new hobby, you know, volunteer. We've been reading self-care, you know, but people in self-isolation, in a way, I think is a kind of privilege. Not everyone's able to self-isolate. Some people aren't able. They have to go out there and work. And those are our frontline workers, but also grocery workers, you know, all kinds of people who've been deemed essential. So what the mental health toll is going to be on the other side of this, it's potentially catastrophic if we don't figure out how to support people. And right now, people can actually get into therapy if they want. from their home. They can just make a call, or, you know, Google on psychology today, find a therapist and start teletherapy. I think it's a really good idea for people if they can afford it, or, you know.
You know what I found so fascinating, sorry, Jazz, through this whole time is, you know, it seems like everything takes so long to implement when we were just running our day-to-day lives as usual. But now we've seen just how fast everyone can really rally together all towards a common cause, whether it be this or other things, but like just how services have changed in the city and across the world so quickly on a dime. It really makes you realize we could get a lot more done than we suspect we can. And it just takes kind of everyone working together towards a common goal. So that's been fascinating to see.
Yeah, you know, for me, it's funny because, like, as I said, I started this thing, and then 2 hours later it was live. And, you know, someone asked me the next day, like, or the next week, how did you do that? Like, are you American? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, no, under normal circumstances, that would have taken you months probably.
Well, because government can't do it because they're not agile enough. Everything's so glacial, and everything has to be run by a million different people, and anyone can say no at any time. So we can see, though, that we, you know, humans on a grassroots level, without the big no of government, we can get a lot done. Yes, we're very adaptable, actually. Humans are very adaptable, and what we're seeing is a lot of people adapting fast, but it still does have an impact on people, and it's stressful on people. It is.
Back in our office and back in our studio, a lot of our viewers know, and even our listeners hear us speak about it all the time. There's a sign behind me in my studio, which says "Ready, Fire, Aim," and the fact that you were able to just get up, get it done in a couple of days. You had probably no idea how to get it all together, but you started it.
Yeah.
And then you kind of readjusted, and probably are still readjusting as we speak. So
totally.
Ready, fire, aim, right?
Yeah. Building the bicycle as you're riding it. Yeah. That's what we've been doing. That is what we've been doing.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And if I hadn't thought about it for any longer or more deeply, I don't know that I would have done it.
Paralysis by analysis, right?
Because it's so much work.
Well, and you would have figured out potential problems that would have arose, and I don't know if I can deal with that, or if I should, or if I want to, and that enough would deter you from getting going, right?
Yeah, like, what if I get in trouble? What if I do something wrong? What if I, like, what? And then, so I didn't even go there. And, you know, it's a kind of lesson for me, you know, in a number of ways. One is, like, just step out into the breach, like, just go, and you'll figure it out along the way. I mean, that's my TV production experience, I think, coming into play, not my sort of background as therapist. It's more like, you know, somebody will say, can you do this? And I'll think, no, that's not possible. But then I'll say, yeah, okay, I can do it. You know, like, I'll just do it. Let's just do it. And then you figure it out.
It's a huge feat to get 800 of your medical professional colleagues to get together within a couple of days. Like, just a huge feat. Congrats on that. I wanted to go back and get your professional opinion, and if you don't mind elaborating on something you said. You said that self-isolation can be a very good thing. There might be somebody who's watching or listening to this saying, like, what do you mean? Like, I'm having a very tough time with this. And so if you don't mind, elaborate on kind of that thought that you had.
Well, what I was saying, I think, a few minutes ago, was that for some folks, this is not a problem. Self-isolation is not a problem. The problem is connecting for some people. Now, I guess one of the ways that I think as a therapist is, okay, so something bad happens, something's difficult. So you can either let it pull you down, or you can figure out how to frame it in a way that operates in the service of a life, in the service of improvement, self-improvement. So I'm not talking about analysis paralysis. I'm talking about self-reflection, sorting out some things about yourself that you haven't had time to really consider and you've been avoiding. What have you been avoiding? You know, trying to just learn about ourselves in this time, like using it in the service of life.
And tactically speaking, Karen, how would one do that? Is that based on the questions they're asking themselves they need to like, what's the tools that somebody might need?
So what's self-reflection? You're asking me, what is self-reflection? That's what you're
Right.
asking. And so self-reflection in itself is, it's like, it's not dissociation. It's like you take apart the observer part of the mind and you sort of put it up on the ceiling, and you have an aerial view of yourself and all of your doings and goings on and relating. And every once in a while you go up there and you go, what are those people doing down there? Or what's she doing? Why is she doing that? Why is she so scared right now? Why is she so avoidant right now? And so you're gathering data. You're data collecting. You're not judging, because what you're doing is you're doing kind of what a therapist does, right? That's what a therapist does. And hopefully a good therapist over time will allow you to internalize that function. That's that function of self-observation. You internalize it so you can go up and go, I think you're upset right now, and that's why everything feels so persecutory. Or I think you're avoiding right now because you're afraid that you're going to feel anxious, but in being afraid of feeling anxious, you're making yourself anxious. Like it's that kind of thing. So
Got it.
And so it's kind of note taking. This is a mindfulness sort of technique, but it's a bit more than that. Yeah, because you're dipping in and out of yourself in order to understand yourself better.
And it almost seems like you're really using the left part of your brain a lot more to think more objectively outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not the judgmental, because we all have a judge, right, that stands over wagging its finger. It's not that, but you want to be curious about that voice, like when you're judging yourself. Whoa, is that, like, who is that? What part of me is that? What's that judge trying to do? Probably trying to protect me from making a mistake, but a bit misguided in that it's not very kind.
So it's interesting. You're really asking people to be a lot more present in the moment with their thoughts, right? And most of the days we don't even have the time to do that, because you're rushing to work, or you're rushing to the grocery store, pick up your kids, whatever it may be, and you don't even have the time. Where now it's almost, we have this luxury of the time, and it's just that we need to know a few tools on how to deal with all those thoughts that are probably always there, but we kind of just let them come in and out.
We let them come in and out, or we push them aside because we're afraid of them, right? We don't want to be afraid of ourselves. It's all just you. Yeah. And so,
yeah, no, I mean, I look at myself in the mirror sometimes and I'm scared of myself because I don't have the body that I wanted, right? But I get what you're saying. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And you're like super judgmental about it, way more judgmental than anyone else would be. And again, what are you trying to do with the judgment? You're trying to help yourself, but it's just, there's a kinder way, so it's all,
it's interesting. Oh, sorry, finish.
Okay. Yeah, done.
I was gonna say, it's interesting. I felt like I do a number of Zoom calls with friends and whatnot. And week one, everyone was kind of sort of thought this was all relatively interesting and kind of fun. They still had a lot of energy. And as I've seen as the weeks go by, kind of, people are reaching out to each other even a little bit less now, when it should almost be the opposite, right? I think people are starting to recognize that they might be in this a lot longer than they originally anticipated, and people are just kind of dealing with those feelings. I actually just finished writing a blog post. Once this will be out next week, it will have come out on Sunday, and I'm calling it the 5 stages of quarantine. Kind of like the 5 stages of grief, right? Yeah. Like at first you're you're in denial a little bit, and as you move through, and then you're in depression, and then finally, hopefully we all come to a place of acceptance, and then that ability to kind of deal with this whole situation head on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we were all initially in shock, and we all had decided, well, it's going to be about 2 weeks. I can do 2 weeks of this.
It's like a vacation.
It's like some kind of just like a little unplug. And that's just not what this is at all. And we're not actually very wired for uncertainty. We don't like it. We'll do a lot to pretend that it's not happening and to try to find certainty where there is none. And so part of what we can also learn during this time are tools for better tolerating not knowing what's coming, because bad stuff's going to happen. And it's not about like making a million contingency plans so that, nothing bad like really hits you. It's that bad stuff's going to happen. And what we need is to be able to tolerate it. And that's the acceptance piece. Yeah.
And all my viewers and listeners know that I don't have a formal education, so I'm definitely glad that I'm not the smartest person in this room, and I'm very, very thankful to have both of you on at this time, because, you know, as the old saying goes, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're probably in the wrong room. And so thank you to you two for that. But what I was saying in terms of about when an event happens, what I learned a long time ago was that a formula that worked well for me was E plus R equals O. So something bad happens as the event, your response, which is the R, you get, that will determine the O, which is the outcome. And so we all get that chance, we all get the opportunity to on how we respond to that event, and which will determine the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because the event is the event. Yeah, there's no stopping that. There's no stopping the pandemic. There's no, you know, but if using this to become better citizens, using this to become better spouse, you know, better spouse, a better parent, a better, you know, just sort of maybe more political, maybe more engaged, you know, using this to, you know, sort of like puncture some of that, that denial. Yeah, that we spend a lot of time in. Yeah.
Alto, you mentioned that you've had to deal with some anxiety and depression. If you don't mind me asking you, and we have Karen online with us now, and maybe you can kind of give us some tips, because there's someone for sure listening or watching that's going through it and also has gone through it, and it possibly will go through it in the future. What was the feeling like? Like, what was that like when you say anxiety and depression? Some people don't even know what that means. Like, they know it's a word, right, but they, like, what was the actual feeling?
You know, I want to be careful here because I'm self-diagnosing myself. So I'm not a professional to say that this is exactly what it is. I believe I've read before that depression has to last a certain amount of time. So I'm not sure that I was necessarily a textbook case. I just had, you know, about a week and a half worth where, you know, I would wake up in the morning and there's just this doom and gloom, like there's no reason to get out of bed. And the small tasks all of a sudden became very, very difficult. Like just taking a shower became like this huge thing that I had to do. Very irritable. My poor husband had to deal with that, but like just and no solutions to any problems. Like people would come to me, well, have you tried this? Or what do you think about that? And everything was just like, oh, you wouldn't understand, you don't know. And then, you know, you sort of start this vicious cycle where you almost start isolating yourself more from the people who actually are there to help, right? I would spend more time in my room alone, more time sleeping. My eating patterns changed. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart would be racing. And I would just have all these concerns over, I really just think lack of control, as we were speaking before. Like, I don't know how to control the situation, and I don't know when the end is going to be. But luckily, you know, it takes sometimes like another event. My dad got sick and he was sent to the hospital, not with COVID, thankfully, but they thought they suspected a heart attack, which I'm not sure which one would have been worse at that time. And sometimes it takes something else to kind of snap you out of your self-loathing and realize, like, now I had to be there for somebody else. And so I've kind of taken the latter part of this week to try and just do things that are kind to other people. And I have actually found that that's been very helpful. If I put myself out there for somebody else and I know that someone needs to lean on me for something, it kind of gives me purpose again. Yes. But Karen, maybe you can speak to whether that's accurate or not in terms of you know, depression and what other people are feeling from a mental health perspective.
Yeah, loss of a sense of control and purpose are two of the sort of key triggers for depression. But I wanted to I twigged to something you said, and I think it's so important because, of course, again, back to the tips and tricks of avoiding depression and anxiety, I'm so allergic to that idea because, as you said, people were trying to be helpful and like nudge you or helpy, you being helpy, I call it helpy. So I call it helpiness. And I think it makes us feel so misunderstood, so misrecognized. Our pain is not being held or valued or, just like for a second, just acknowledged. And so to be told, well, just get up out of bed and make yourself an egg. And, it's the worst thing that you can hear at that time. You got to get there yourself, and what you did was you found the way for you to pull yourself. First of all, your father getting sick, so scary, but yes, you no longer can be inside that bubble, that gray, dark bubble that is depression. But secondly, you decided, okay, I'm going to take that and I'm going to do for other people. And that's going to give me a reason to wake up and a sense of purpose and a sense of that I'm operating in line with who I feel myself to be and who I want to be. That was your way out. It's different for everyone. And some people need to be there for longer. They need it. There are things that we can access in a state of depression that we can't in other states. So we can also not hate it so much. I know it's an awful place to be, but we can learn something from it, So yeah, that's why I don't offer tips and tricks for depression. I don't say, oh, have you thought of such and such? I mean, oh.
Yes. Yeah. Because at that time, if that's where you are in your cycle, the last thing, like you said, that's really the last thing you want to hear, because you truly feel so alone in the journey. And it's almost as if no other human being could possibly understand what you're going through in that moment. It's very lonely. It's a very lonely place to be. But it's interesting that you said, if you can kind of in the moment say respect what you're going through almost in a way, and appreciate that, we're humans and we're grateful for the fact that we're able to have these intense emotions and experiences. There might be something to that.
That's music to my ears, because I do think, as I said, we don't want to be afraid of ourselves, and all emotions are there for a reason. They're data. They're communications from a part of us to another part of us, and we want to listen to them. We want to listen to them as if they are, just the dearest friend or person in our life. What is it that you need to be? What is it that I need to know right now? What am I telling myself about the world, about myself, about my relationships, and how I can make things better for myself, and just letting yourself be there isn't the worst thing in the world, even though it's very uncomfortable.
Karen, where do you think the stigma of getting help, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, and I'm sure yourself and your colleagues are obviously trying to remove this stigma in some way or some form, but I'm curious for myself to see, I love people. The toughest part for me during this isolation is not being physically with people. And so the thought of somebody hurting mentally, and not being able to get out of bed, and it gives me goosebumps, because I want to help. On the flip side of that, I don't understand, and I'm not trying to be judgy by any means for anyone who's listening or watching that, but I just don't get where the stigma started. Wow, if you can get professional help, get professional help, to try to help you.
Yeah, you know what? I think this is where psychoanalysis helps me, because I think in a way the stigma has to do with our own terror of our own pain, and it's projection. The stigma is projection. I can't abide mental anguish, therefore any mental anguish must be weakness. Because I can't handle my own. Do you see? It's yes. That's the essence of the stigma. It's we're seeing a part of ourselves that we can't abide. That's all. And so, I mean, that's all. That's a lot. But but maybe on the, and this is again, putting, maybe it's too soon to talk about the upsides of a global pandemic, but maybe on the other side of this, we'll be able to have a larger conversation as a society about the essential nature of mental wellness, and the essential component in public health of mental health. Public health needs to have mental health as it's sort of like one of the prime columns, yeah? And so
Yes.
hopefully maybe we're getting to a place where doctors who are reaching out to our teletherapists because they don't want to go through insurance because they're afraid of the stigma, you know, that maybe on the other side of this, they will see that it's okay to reach out for help, you know?
I totally agree, because I think anybody who thought that somebody going through like mental health problems, that can never happen to me, or that is weak. The person's mind is weak. Like, come on, Joe Blow, like, get up. And
snap out of it.
snap out of it. Now everyone, and you mentioned this earlier, and I didn't get a chance to say anything about it, but the silver lining maybe of this pandemic, and I hope it to be true, is, well, do you remember when you were alone? Because I haven't spent this much time alone, like, that I can ever remember. And so now I have been talking a lot more to myself. I have had time to self-reflect. I do know how it feels to maybe not have someone to talk to, or just the natural brainstorming that happens when you're with a group. And so I really, really hope for anyone who's listening, if you thought for a second that someone who has mental health problems or just having trouble getting out of bed was weak, you might want to look at yourself in the mirror in this situation now.
Yeah, well, maybe more people will be able to, yes, be empathetic after this. Yeah.
I love that word, empathetic, having empathy, right? Like, it's something that I definitely think we were lacking going into this, and hopefully people get a lot more out of it. What are you seeing? Because the health workers, and there's so many other frontline workers as well, the grocery store people that you spoke about, the transit workers. I mean, to get like, if we didn't have transit open, there would be nobody going into the hospitals. The healthcare workers wouldn't be able to do their job. The grocery workers wouldn't be able to do their job. So I didn't want to forget the transit workers as well. Now, what are you seeing? Like, if you're allowed to even share, I'm not asking for anything specific, but just kind of a general, like, what's some problems that they're going through that maybe all of us who are watching and listening can keep them in our thoughts and prayers at this time?
Well, I think, you know, I can speak generally about the kinds of anxiety, depression, stress, and terrors of the folks on the front lines. More than getting sick, people are frightened of getting their families sick. They're frightened of taking this home, unbeknownst to them, and then getting their kids, their elderly parents, whoever, sick. So that's one thing we're seeing a lot of. They're feeling betrayed by their employers, a lot of them, because they don't feel like they have the adequate, PPEs. They don't have the adequate facilities. They don't have adequate training. They don't have adequate, like, empathy supports. And so there's that. They don't have anyone to talk to because they can't talk to their family. They need to talk. They need to have someone bear witness to the fear, but they can't talk to their family because they don't want to make their family more frightened than they already are. I mean, there's that. So these are, these are heroes to us, but they're just people too. And so anybody who had any kind of pre-existing issue in their life, let's say someone's going through a divorce, a frontline worker, and now they're also, they're in the middle of a custody battle. And, so we have to remember these are human beings, and the stress is unbelievable. So there's that, there's exhaustion, there's, and the uncertainty where a lot of people trained in medicine are not actually equipped to deal with the level of uncertainty and changing procedures that are happening every day. Right. That's not how they've been trained. Their training actually sort of comes from the military, especially nurses. And, when I say military, I mean not so much battlefield, but like rigorous procedures. And right now that uncertainty takes a toll as well. So, I mean, and also people, they haven't had to yet, but they're going to be potentially faced with making terrible ethical choices. do I let this person die or this person? Who, you know, and so they're really worried about that. So those are the kind of main things that I'm seeing among frontline medical workers. Yeah.
Again, I just, and I know I speak for all of us on this call, really wanted to thank all frontline workers. Again, thank you. Like, we cannot say it enough, because especially after all the things that you just mentioned, Karen, and there was at least a handful of things that I never even thought about, like that they were probably going through. Because you're right, like I started to feel like they were Captain America and Iron Man and the Hulk. Like, really, like I really started to look at them as heroes. Like, oh, they're not going to go through any of this stuff. They know what, like they're prepared for this. No, they're not. And you just kind of brought that to light. And so I really appreciate that.
When my dad was in the hospital, there was a doctor there, and he runs the cardiology department. And he's saying, like, there was nobody in any of the rooms that were there. My dad was the only patient that they had. There was one nurse for him, and everyone else had been deployed to move their efforts over to dealing with COVID. So here's somebody who doesn't even normally deal with that type of problem being moved over. And if you haven't, like, it's not like you're a generalized doctor all the time and you know how to deal with every situation on any given day, right? You kind of specialize. And so here are people, they're just putting their hands up and saying, yeah, I guess I'll go over there. I also know doctors who have been retired who have now come back, and they put up their hands to help too. And one of them's in her 60s, and so she's probably a bit of a higher risk person as well. And people are coming in from all over the place just to help, right?
Yeah, they are, and putting themselves at risk. And yes, and you also mentioned just the spooky nature of the hospital, like the empty rooms that are waiting for patients, or that, you know, it's very discombobulating. It's very disturbing for people to go into a hospital and experience the hospital just environment, the setting, the way that it is right now. So yeah, we've never seen, I mean, it goes without saying, we've never seen anything like this. And we need to be ready to help this, you know, this population and all of us on the other side of this, because we're going to be seeing mental health issues reverberating for months and years to come as a result of this.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because, you know, a thought that I've been having as well of late is the economic catastrophe that can happen the longer this obviously goes on, or the longer people don't get back to work. Obviously not like back to normal. I don't think we'll ever have a back to normal. Like, I think 9/11, I mean, we lived a new norm, right? I mean, airport security changed, so many things change. I mean, I don't know how and what's going to change here, but the catastrophe that will probably be the event from an economical perspective is going to affect a lot of people mentally to a scale that you've probably never seen. What is something that maybe someone can do now? And I don't mean to ask for tips and tricks, because I'm a good listener and I know not to ask you that. But perhaps what should we be aware of if it's my friend that might be going through something? What's some questions, or what can I do? Is it a matter of saying, hey, I get in touch with Karen, speak with a professional? Like, what is something that I can do if I see my friend, a frontline health worker, going through something, or just a friend in general? Like, if I see Laura or Tyler, somebody in my office, go through something, what can I do to help?
So, not be healthy.
Okay. Good. I know that.
Not be healthy.
Not be healthy. And to take a therapist's trick, which is to listen. To listen.
We have 2 ears, one mouth for a reason.
Yeah, we don't have to and can't ever truly understand the experience of another, but the attempt to do it, the effort to try to understand, to keep trying, that is so healing for people. And if the person can't, if it's too much for you because you're not a therapist, if it's too much, sometimes people need more help. And they ought to reach out if they can get help with a therapist. If not, there are, crisis lines, and we need to be lobbying the government to put way more effort into supporting mental health. We need to get the government to add, get therapists covered under OHIP, for example, or partially covered under OHIP, or get insurance companies to acknowledge the services of psychotherapists in addition to psychologists, that kind of thing. So if you want to do something, get political, get your voice heard. If you see that there's a gap, fill it. That's what we've been doing. And, but we need more people to be doing that kind of stuff.
Well, I hope this podcast lands in the right, lands in the right ears of the people that need to see this and hear this, because I couldn't agree with you more. Mental health is something that needs to be at the forefront, like, period, because if you're not right in here, then there's not much that we can really provide for society.
It is health. Mental health is health.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just is. I mean, to separate them out, it makes no sense, but it's part of that. We don't want to own it ourselves. We don't want to know about mental anguish because we can't stand our own. I think that's, and so, but yes, that message needs to get out over and over and over again. So thanks for letting me say it over and over and over again.
Karen, thank you for not only coming on, but way bigger than that, for, I don't know what turned it on, like, literally for you that night, that morning, when you decided that you were going to start this and start to collaborate with other professionals and allow frontline workers to have access to over 800 professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Just before you leave, how does somebody get in touch with, where do they go? What's the online, is it social, Instagram, Facebook, or a website? How does like a frontline worker get to you right now?
So they go right to our website, Covid19 Therapists.com. And that's for people who want to sign up as a mental health professional. And there's another place on the website, just on the same page, for people who want a referral to a therapist. And we send 2 to 3 referrals to each person who's asked for help. And we have sent out, I think, 550 referrals just in the last couple of weeks. And we haven't hit peak yet. So, it's obviously something that's very needed. And I hope that people find it.
That's Covid19 Therapists.com.
Yeah.
Karen, thank you for what you do on a daily basis pre-COVID. Thank you for what you're doing now. And thank you for being on the REC Experience today.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
This has been the REC Experience Podcast with Jazz Takhar, an REC Canada production.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching and listening. Please take a second right now to subscribe and follow us on whatever podcast platform you're watching or listening. It means the world to me. Thank you.